really making himself at home, a tenant's home, that is, in Westland. They called him over to do home repairs and instead caught him in the act with a woman.
Yeah, you never know what you're walking into when you come into work here at Fox 2 Roop. Now, the tenants in Westland, they say that the tenant and his special little friend, they position themselves right in front of the security camera. We had to look at all that footage. Very clear what they're doing. We paid a visit to that tenant to see what he had to say for himself.
He walked back and forth through here naked. And
what did he do in the kitchen? I saw him come out with some kind of rag or something.
I don't know. I might have been trying to make a sandwich, but I don't know. It's creepy.
Their landlord was supposed to be removing dead birds from the attic. Instead, he was giving a lesson on the birds and the bees on camera.
So right now we're kind of standing at the scene of the crime. What did you guys do? Did you clean before you?
Most definitely. My wife, she's germophobic, so I had to most definitely clean it before she even stepped in anywhere in this house, period.
It allegedly happened Monday in Westland while Javon Crawford and his wife were in the hospital with his sick grandma. His wife started getting alerts from their security cameras on her phone.
She just pointed the phone to me, and then I seen him just doing what he was doing right here in our house.
Was it live?
It was live footage.
Oh my God.
Time stamped and everything.
Bonnet down, legs up for about an hour.
I'm wondering too if this guy's done this before. He seems so comfortable.
Too comfortable. So I know for a fact that somebody that comfortable, what else could be done?
That landlord has some explaining to do. We tracked him to his Canton Township home.
Is this you naked in a tenant's home?
What? The Crawfords have handed that X-rated film over to police.
How hard is it going to be next month to cut that check to him?
It's going to be hard. I'm gonna probably write some languages on the back of the check for him to transfer to him.
A little special memo.
Yeah, special memo. Yeah.
Yeah, the landlord drove off. He would not commit to himself being in that video. Now, we did consult some prosecutors and defense attorneys. They're a little bit split on whether a crime was actually committed here. If there is one, and police are investigating, it would probably be something like trespassing, which is a misdemeanor. But it's likely they have a civil matter on their hands for some kind of lease violation.
So let me set the scene for you. It's a Monday. A man named Javon Crawford and his wife are not home. They're at the hospital visiting a sick grandmother, which, if you know anything about Black families, you know that's one of the most emotionally draining places that you can be. Your mind is somewhere else, your heart is somewhere else, and you're trying to be present for your family. You're not thinking about what's happening back at the house. And then her phone buzzes. A security camera notification. She looks down, she turns the phone towards her husband, and right there in the home they are paying rent on, mind you, the man that they write a check to every single month, their landlord, is naked, having sex with a woman who's not his tenant, on their floor, in their space, in the home where they sleep, eat, and live. And then, because apparently that wasn't enough, he got up, walked around naked, and made himself a sandwich. Now, I know a lot of people saw this story, right? I'm a little late to it, but a lot of people saw this story and treated it like a wild viral moment, something to laugh at on social media. And, bro really got a snack after. I saw the memes, I saw the jokes. And listen, I understand the impulse, but I need y'all to stop laughing for a second, because this story is not funny. This story is actually terrifying when you sit with it long enough. And I don't think most of the coverage, right? Not Fox News, not the Shade Room, not Complex, not Outkick, not any of these platforms that have covered the story is telling you the whole truth about what happened here. So today, we're going deeper, no pun intended. Now, before we get into everything else, let's be clear about who the victim in this situation actually is. Javon Crawford and his wife are a couple that's renting a home in Westland, Michigan, right? They were hoping that their landlord was at the residence to do some house repairs. Specifically, dead birds had gotten into the attic and needed to be removed. That's it. That was the ask. Dead birds, get them out the attic. They gave that man access to their home for a maintenance call. A routine, reasonable, completely normal tenant request. Javon shared that the landlord seemed way too comfortable with the act, which lasted for roughly an hour. And he said, "So I know for a fact that somebody that comfortable, what else could be done?" Read that back. Somebody that comfortable. That's not the language of a man who watched a one-time lapse in judgment. That's the language of a man who looked at what he saw on the camera and thought, this person has done this before. Nobody just walks around somebody else's home completely butt-ass naked, has sex, wanders into the kitchen, and makes a snack if they're nervous. If they feel like they're trespassing, if they feel any urgency to get out of a space that doesn't belong to them. You know what that comfort level tells you? It tells you that this landlord had developed a relationship with that space, a familiarity, a casualness, like he owned it. Oh wait, technically, in his mind, he did. And that is the first thing that nobody's talking about.
I'm not gonna lie, with the way that these rent prices are, if I saw on the camera that my landlord was having extramarital affairs, I'm not gonna go to the news. But I am gonna knock on your door and say, I need the rest of the lease paid. Like, on the first of the month, don't be asking me for no payments, because that is disgusting. I told you to come over here and fix my sink, not fix your... not to be sliding up into some coochie at my house. Mind you, sneakers still on, you booty butt ass naked, and you went into my fridge. I'm not going to the news. You're literally going to have to take care of the rest of my payments. And I'm going to need that in fucking writing. Like, what? Can you imagine some shit? And then then when they pulled up to the man, he was talking about he don't got nothing to say. Of course you don't got nothing to say. The only thing you should be saying is that this person no longer has to pay rent anymore. The audacity.
Now, I need everyone to understand something about the landlord-tenant relationship before we go any further. It's not a relationship between equals. The tenant needs shelter, they need a place to stay, and the landlord provides that. The tenant is financially obligated to the landlord every single month. The landlord holds the lease, holds the power of eviction, and holds the keys, literally, to whether you have a roof over your head or not. Now, in many cities, in many markets, especially in working class communities, finding a rental or an apartment at an affordable price is not easy. You don't just pick up and leave because you're uncomfortable. You can't always afford to. So this is not really abstract, right? This is the reality that Javon Crawford and his wife are living in right now. Now, Javon admitted that it will be hard to pay for rent next month because of the crazy, obscene discovery. Did you catch that though? He found out his landlord violated his home, violated his trust, and violated his space. And his first practical problem is, can I afford to move? Can I afford not to pay rent while I figure this out? Because in Michigan, if you withhold rent, and all my Michigan people out there know this, the clock starts on the eviction process almost immediately the second you don't pay the rent. And Michigan landlord tenant law allows landlords to issue 7-day notice to quit if rent is not paid on a due date. 7 days. That's how quickly a tenant who doesn't pay for any reason can start the eviction process. So Javon can't just say, I'm not paying you until this is resolved without real legal risk. This man's landlord violated his home, and the system is set up in a way where the landlord still holds all of the cards, or most of the cards. And where is that in the coverage of this story?
Eiffel. Legs in the air is crazy, let me tell you. But the worst part about that is that later on in that video, she says he got up and made himself a sandwich in the middle of activities. You're up in my home, knocking boots, and you're gonna get up and you're gonna use my food on top of it to make your sweaty ass a fucking sandwich.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the law, because this is where I need everybody to really sit down and really pay attention. Several prosecutors and defense attorneys were asked about what took place and whether it was illegal. Most of them are split on whether it's a crime or not. It's possible the act could be trespassing, but it's likely more of a civil issue for violating portions of a lease agreement. So let me translate that for you. A man entered a home that a family pays rent to live in without notifying them, used that house as a private rendezvous location for a sexual encounter, walked around naked in that space, went into the kitchen, and the legal system can't really agree on whether that's a crime that was actually committed. Think about that. Really take some time to really think about that. Now, here's what Michigan law actually says about landlord entering your home. Michigan law requires landlords to give 24 hours notice before entering a rental property. Now, Michigan treats a tenant's right to occupy a rental home as a possessory interest protected by law. Now, a landlord who interferes with that interest without legal justification can be sued for damages, even if a lease contains a clause letting the landlord enter freely at any time. So here's the thing. The Crawfords gave the landlord permission to come and remove the dead birds from the attic. They knew he was going to be there. So legally, some prosecutors are going to say that the entry itself wasn't unauthorized because there was an invitation there. But here's the question that nobody's asking. Was the permission to enter a maintenance invitation, or was it just some blank check to just do whatever he wanted to do in that space for however long he wanted to be there? Because if I give you permission to fix my sink and you fix my sink and then sit down in my living room, eat my food, and watch my TV for 3 hours, have you not overstayed or overstepped, that authorization? You entered with permission for one purpose. Anything outside of that purpose, especially something this egregious, arguably constitutes a violation of the scope of entry, which goes back to that possessory interest Michigan law protects.
He was caught on hidden camera. That landlord, if you're that tenant, what you doing? Like, do you want some? Because I'm thinking allegedly that woman that he was putting through the mattress was his side piece in that tenement or whatever, that housing situation. And that's her way of paying rent. You know what I mean? So he using your apartment he's using your apartment to give somebody a break on rent while charging you rent. And the only way you know this because you had a hidden camera. If you ain't having, who knows, man? Your spot is the band.
But here's the kicker. It might not be criminal. It might actually be civil, which means the burden falls on Javon Crawford to hire a lawyer, to pursue action, to spend money, time, emotional energy to hold this man accountable while still figuring out how he's going to pay rent. Do you see how this works? Now, let me ask another question that I haven't seen really anywhere in the coverage of this story. And the question is, who is the woman? Now, we know the landlord brought somebody with him. We know she was a willing participant in whatever happened on that floor. But here's what nobody is pressing on. Did she know whose home this was? Did she know that they were in a tenant space? Did she think this man owned this property in the sense that he lived there? Or did she know it was a rental and go along with it anyway? Because if she knew, if this man brought a woman to his tenant's home, presented it as some kind of private space for their sexual encounter, and she was aware of the circumstances, then we have a conversation about complicity and a violation of somebody else's house. And if she didn't know, if he told her this was just, one of his properties and just let her believe it was unoccupied or it was fair game, then she's also a victim of this man's disrespect and deception. Either way, she is a character in this story that not one outlet has investigated or thought to discuss. And I find that very interesting because in every viral story, we want to know everything about the victim and nothing about the full picture of the violation. Now, I keep coming back to what Javon said because in a story full of disturbing details, that phrase might be the most disturbing. Too comfortable. Javon described the situation as creepy, adding that the landlord appeared completely at ease, as if nothing unusual was taking place. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever been somewhere that you weren't supposed to be, even as a kid, even somewhere harmless, in a friend's house when their parents weren't home, somewhere that you snuck into? You remember how that felt, right? You were on edge. You were jumpy. You were paranoid. Every sound made you nervous. You didn't, just walk into the kitchen and start making sandwiches. The only way you walk around somebody's home naked, have sex in their living room, and then just casually go to the kitchen, the only way that happens is if your brain has categorized that space as safe, as familiar, as somewhere that you've been before without consequence. Now, Javon knows this. He said it himself. I know for a fact that somebody that comfortable, what else could be done? He's not talking about what happened on camera. He's asking what might have happened before the camera was here. This is the question that should have every tenant with a landlord who has a key to their home lose sleep at night. How many times has your landlord entered your space without you knowing, without notifying you? Not to do something as dramatic as this, but just to walk through, to look around, to feel ownership over a space that you live in and they technically own. Because this landlord didn't wake up Monday and suddenly decide, to use his tenant's home as a personal hotel room. This kind of behavior escalates. It starts with a small boundary crossing, unannounced entry here, I was just in the neighborhood, drop in there, until at some point the landlord's sense of entitlement over the space becomes so normalized in his own mind that he no longer thinks twice about treating it like it's his own space. And the tenant never knows because the tenant doesn't have a camera. Crawford's did, which leads me to the point that nobody in this entire news cycle has made. Javon Crawford's wife only found out because of her security camera. The landlord didn't know that the camera was there. He had no idea he was being watched. What does that tell you? This story has a resolution, if you can call it that, because the Crawfords had a security camera, because the camera sent an alert to her phone, because she was paying attention. But let me ask you this. What about the tenants who don't have cameras? What about the tenants who gave their landlords access to do repairs and never thought twice about installing surveillance in their own home? What about people renting homes in houses where a camera in the common area would be awkward or complicated? What about elderly tenants, immigrants, people who don't know their rights, people who are afraid of retaliation? This situation only became a news story because there was video evidence, not because of any law that prevented it, not because of any system that protected Javon and his wife, because of a $50 to maybe $100 smart camera that sent a notification to a phone. The protection in this situation was entirely self-generated. The Crawfords protected themselves, and they still might not get legal justice for what happened. That should make all of us deeply uncomfortable about the tenant privacy in this country and what that actually looks like. If a landlord enters a tenant's unit without notice repeatedly, it could be considered landlord harassment, and the tenant may have the right to end the lease early without any type of penalties. End the lease. That's the remedy here. Pack up, move out, uproot your life, and start over. Not arrest, not criminal charges, not financial accountability that the landlord actually feels. Move out. In this economy, in this rental market, just move. Now here's something that also other outlets covering the story are definitely not connecting. This is not the first time. Westland, Michigan has been in the news for a landlord exploiting tenants in a sexual or invasive way before. A lawsuit that was filed by U.S. Justice Department alleges that a different Westland, Michigan landlord, William Aaron Asper, began sexually harassing female tenants back in 2018, offering housing benefits in exchange for sexual contact and subjecting some tenants to unwelcome touching and groping. He is also accused of retaliating against tenants who rebuffed his advances, including threatening to evict a woman who rejected him. One tenant, Jessica Grevenstuck, who alleged that he tried to coerce her into sex, spent years fighting to expose him and created a Facebook page in the fight against him before the Department of Justice finally filed a lawsuit. Two different landlords, same city, same dynamic. A property owner who sees his tenants not as people with rights, but as people over who he holds power, and decides to exercise that power in a sexual, invasive, and violating way. Now, I want to be very careful here because there are two different situations involving two different individuals, right? But I'm not going to pretend that pattern doesn't deserve attention. Housing insecurity creates the conditions for this kind of abuse. When people desperately need shelter, when the rental market is really tough, when tenants fear eviction more than they trust the legal system, predatory landlords have space to operate, and they know that. Now, I want to come back to something for a moment. Crawford explained that because his wife is germophobic, when they came back to their apartment, he cleaned the entire apartment. That one line, right? That one small detail that every other outlet kind of used as a throwaway fact, that to me is the most human and heartbreaking part of this entire story. This man came home from the hospital where he had been sitting with a sick grandmother, already emotionally depleted. He came home to the knowledge that his landlord had violated their space, and then he cleaned it because his wife is germophobic, because she couldn't be in that space knowing what had happened in it without something being done to make it feel safe again. He cleaned it. He didn't get to process. He didn't get to fall apart. He came home and he cleaned up after his landlord's violation so his wife could feel okay in the home they're still going to have to live in. That is what it means to be a tenant who has been violated and has no immediate options. You still have to live there. You still have to wake up in that house. You still have to cook in that kitchen. You still have to pay rent next month, and you clean up. because what else are you going to do? Now let's talk about the man at the center of all this. Now, he was approached right at the house, for explanation. He waved them off and declined to comment when reporters asked about the situation. Now, he lives in Canton Township, not Westland. He owns the property in Westland, a neighborhood he doesn't live in, and he rents it out to tenants while he lives somewhere else. He collects their rent checks. He has a key to their home. He decides when and whether to make repairs. And when a news crew showed up at his home to ask about him violating their home, he waved them off because he could, because he still has the lease. He still has the power. He still has the key. I need somebody to ask, has he been back? Does he still have access to that property? Is Javon Crawford still writing this man a rent check while waiting to see if anything legal comes of this? That is a question that nobody seems to be in a hurry to answer. Now, let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying the landlord should be locked up and throw away the key based on what we currently know, right? I'm not here to convict somebody, in the court of public opinion beyond what the facts support. What I am saying is this: the fact that legal experts can't agree on whether a crime was committed when a landlord used a tenant's occupied home for sex during a maintenance call without the tenants knowing about it in a space they have to pay to have exclusive possession of is a sign that tenant protection laws in this country are genuinely insufficient, lackluster at best. The fact that the primary remedy being discussed is a civil suit, meaning the tenant has to hire a lawyer with money he says he doesn't have, is a systemic failure. The fact that the landlord faces no immediate legal consequences while Javon still has to decide whether to pay rent next month is a systemic failure. The fact that the only reason this story exists is because they had installed a camera themselves is a systemic failure. Michigan law established that a tenant's right to occupy a rental home is a possessory interest. A landlord who interferes with that interest without legal justification can be sued for damages. And this protection can't be waived even in a lease agreement. That protection exists. Can be sued means nothing to a tenant who can't afford a lawsuit and can't afford to miss next month's rent. Like, we need to talk seriously as a society about the power imbalance in the landlord-tenant relationship. We need to talk about what tenant rights actually means when those rights can only be enforced if you have the resources to enforce them. We also need to talk about the ways that housing insecurity creates conditions that predators, whether sexual or financial or both, exploit. And we need to talk about what it means that Javon Crawford's wife looked at her phone from a hospital waiting room and saw a man violating her home. And her first emotion wasn't anger or disgust. It was probably fear. Fear of what it means to fight back. Fear of what it costs to leave. Fear of what happens if the landlord decides that he wants to retaliate. That fear is real. That fear is rational. And that fear is the product of a system that was never really designed with the tenants in mind. So to close out, here's where I land on this. Javon Crawford and his wife did everything right. They installed the camera. They documented the violation. They went to the police. They talked to the press. They used their name and their face and their story to put this man on blast. And they are still living in the house, still figuring out how to pay rent, still waiting on a legal system that can't even agree on what crime, if any, was committed. The landlord waved off the news camera and walked back into his Canton Township home. And that's the story. Not just wild viral video of landlord caught in the act, but the story is a family that was violated in their home, and the person who violated them is largely insulated from accountability because the power structure says so. So the next time you watch a viral clip of something like this and you laugh, or shake your head and you keep scrolling, ask yourself, what would you do if this was your home, your wife's face when she turned the phone around to you, your decision about whether you can afford to leave or whether you have to stay? Because tenant abuse, whether it's a landlord using your home as his personal hotel room or demanding sexual favors in exchange for repairs or just showing up unannounced because he can, thrives in silence. It thrives when we treat these stories as entertainment instead of evidence of a broken, failed system. And it thrives when the Javon Crawfords of the world fight alone. And to be honest, just looking at this, we can't let him fight alone. So, you know, I just wanted to talk about this because, you know, it was a crazy story. It was a viral story, and I had to kind of talk about it because it was just a crazy, ridiculous situation. But y'all gotta let me know what y'all thought about this down below in the comments, man. Don't forget to smack a like on the video. Also, don't forget to hype up the video. Y'all been doing great with that. Keep it up. It's free. It doesn't cost you a thing. And don't forget to subscribe for the one time. Peace.